Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Marilyn. My name is Katie Valentine. I'm the director of DSF Discover. I'm so glad to welcome Bruce Barkhauer. Hi, Bruce. I'm glad you're here. And if Bruce is appearing on your screen a little sideways, it's a little glitch of the system, and we've decided to have fun with it and just go with it. And so I would actually like to know for all of you if Bruce is appearing vertically or horizontally, or how he's appearing on your screen. Yeah. So we decided not to do gymnastics or ask him to do this training on his head, but just to go with what is. So I do want to do a sound check, make sure that you can all see me. I would love to know where you're from. Just before we get started, we don't want to be speaking to a room of people who can't hear. So I will wait for a little confirmation in the chat box. And yeah, we're really excited that you're here. This is an important topic, and we've been preparing for it for quite a while. All right. Okay. Hi. Perfect. Hey, Marilyn from Wyoming. Great. So I'm going to assume that everyone can hear and see what is going on. Great. Hey, thank you, Elaine. Okay, Bruce, you're right side up for everyone except for me.
Ah, yeah.
So this is going to be my computer's problem, not good. I'm glad we didn't try to troubleshoot it, because there was apparently nothing to troubleshoot except for my technology. So again, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Katie. This event is sponsored by DSF Discover. We're so happy to welcome Bruce Barkhauer. Bruce is the minister of faith and giving for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the very first ever. And he's an expert at finance and at planning and at generosity. And we're really happy to welcome him. If there are no other questions, just say hello to everyone as they're tuning in. Bruce, I will just go ahead and turn it over to you, and I will upload our presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. It really is a delight for me to be with everyone this evening. And our topic tonight is Money Matters. We're looking at some tools for financial freedom and hopefully a little spiritual growth along the way. I do serve as the Minister for Faith and Giving for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I've had 25 years of parish ministry experience as an ordained pastor, and in 2010 was called, as Katie mentioned, to be the first ever Minister for Faith and Giving, and we established and created the Center for Faith and Giving, for which I serve as the director. I'm sort of the resident theologian on stewardship in the Office of General Minister and President, and it's a great job. I tell people I teach generosity for a living, and I'm so glad you can be with us tonight as we have some conversation around that. And I want to start by just saying, give yourself permission to have this time for personal growth and reflection. I'm going to encourage you to give yourself this as a gift, to set aside the other distractions. In my case, before I came online, I gave the dog a Kong with some peanut butter in it. That's going to keep him busy for a while. We put the cat out upstairs, out of the way, so she's not going to be a problem. I'm in a room without a television, and my cell phone is on only if Katie and I need to talk to each other via text message if something goes wrong with our technology. And the only window open on my screen is this PowerPoint and our time together, and I'm going to invite you to do the same thing. Just set those distractions aside. It's tempting to want to check in on those things, and I'll try to keep it moving along and interesting enough that you don't give into that temptation too easily. There's some incentive for sticking around until the end, even if it starts to feel like it might be dragging a little bit, because at the end of the webinar, we're going to give you an opportunity via email to receive a home budget calculator, which is something we've created in an Excel spreadsheet that sort of allows you to simply plug numbers in, and it does the math and calculates percentages and will help you build a home budget, which is one of the things we're going to talk about tonight that's really important as a part of managing our finances. So stick around to the end, and you'll be able to to receive this as a gift from DSF and from the Center for Faith and Giving. So our topic tonight is money, and that's a pretty powerful topic. As you know, it's a topic that some folks say, well, we don't talk about money in polite company. It's a topic in the church that some people say we talk too much about, though usually the evidence says otherwise. Or it's a topic that we don't talk enough about, and that's usually the case. But, in polite company, we don't talk about religion, politics, and money. But the reality is that we swim in a culture of money. It surrounds us and is a part of every part of our life daily. And decisions we make are often influenced by money, and they influence how we spend money. They influence how people spend money to get our attention. So we need to be honest with ourselves and say that this is a topic that it's pretty hard to avoid conversation about. And if we're really just avoiding it, it might be just avoidance because we don't want to deal with some of the realities that come with talking about our money. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. I think it's appropriate for the church and a theological institution to be having this conversation because the Bible has a lot to say about money. There's approximately 2,500 verses in the Bible that relate to money or wealth or material objects or management of assets, ownership of land, etc. There's a lot of conversation in the Bible about this topic. And the fact of the matter is that somebody's a lot smarter than I am did the math. And if you remember the old red letter Bibles, all the words of Jesus in red, what a great idea. About 62 or 3% of the time, Jesus is talking about money, or it's used as a foil or a part of an object lesson, or it's a direct conversation. And so that suggests that there's something around this issue and our faith that is really important. And we're going to want to unpack that a little bit. We'll do that tonight, and we'll do it in the future at a not too distant, far away future. That future in the picture looks pretty far away with a sort of Death Star looking thing. We don't have those yet that I know of, but before we get back on the moon, we're going to offer a class through DSF for some further discussion about the Bible and money. We're going to expand on the spirituality and theology of money, which we're just going to introduce in our conversations tonight. So Katie will have a little bit more to say to that at the end of the presentation tonight, but I just want to make you aware that there's going to be an opportunity to go deeper in this subject. Tonight we're just going to kind of skim across the highlights and whet your appetite and give you some tools you can use right away when it comes to managing your money and getting a handle on this. Now, I've put up some caution tape here to say this is a guilt-free zone. And I say that because money is often a guilt-inducing topic for us. Most of us can think of ways, maybe just in the last hour, we spent money that we might have spent differently, that we made decisions about money that we would like to have over again. And sometimes that's big time buyer's remorse, after we make a major purchase. Sometimes it's, we just made a small purchase, but we know that money could have done something else, or those calories we bought could have maybe been better applied to something else. And a lot of us carry guilt and some shame about money and what our past is like regarding money. And so I want to give you permission to not be guilty about this and to not have shame around this subject, to release your shame and release yourself from some of the past history and decisions you make, even if you are still living with the consequences of those decisions. The goal now is, what do we do next? Maybe we've got too much debt, credit card or student loan or otherwise. Maybe we've made a major purchase or gotten ourselves into a mortgage or a rent contract or lease that is really, really pressing us. The question is, now what? How do we get control over what we can still manage and control and make good, corrective, moment by moment, day by day decisions to move ourselves into a healthier and better place? And so I want to give you permission to have made mistakes in this. I've made mistakes. My wife and I recently made a major purchase that we thought was going to be a good idea, and doing it ahead of retirement seemed like the right thing for a whole lot of reasons. We've reasoned it out. And now there are some potential changes in the future that we couldn't foresee when we made that decision. And so now it might be a little buyer's remorse. It's certainly a little bit of caution now, as realize that some things that we thought we understood and knew are not necessarily the way things are going to be. So this happens to even those of us who've been planning for a long time to make a decision or purchase, and sometimes circumstances just change, and they're beyond your control. And so free yourself up from that, if you would. And begin to think about ways in which you can let some of that go, and think about instead what's next. What's the hopeful future that I can step into? There's a lot of feelings around this whole budgeting and planning and prepping process, and I don't know. Maybe some of these things feel like where you are right now. You know, there should be enough. Biblically, there's a sense of there being an abundance. Certainly from the creation stories forward, we get a sense that God has provided the world with enough of what it needs to not just sustain itself, but to thrive. And in healthy communities, that's supposed to work. Unfortunately, we don't always live in healthy communities, and greed and want and acquisitiveness have overrun the situation to where the management of the resource isn't going so that everybody has what they need. And you may be feeling right now like you know there ought to be enough here, but it feels like I'm always from the bottom looking up, and it's a deep hole, and I don't know how to get out. Maybe in your life you feel at the start of the month when the paycheck has come in and before all the bills have to be paid, things are looking pretty good. But man, by the time you get to the 28th, 9th, and 30th, 31st days, it gets kind of scary. You may have some anxiety about money that you can't overcome because it's part of your background. We're going to touch on that tonight as well. And maybe it's kind of hard for you to figure out what your priorities are. Where should you be spending your money? And maybe you're struggling with that. I don't know if any of those things feel like maybe where you are. Maybe you've got some other feeling that comes with this. Kind of meet you where you're at tonight. And again, to sort of give you some tools to help you begin to move forward and maybe feel like that hole isn't so deep, and maybe the light at the end of the tunnel isn't a train.
Thank you, Bruce, so much. I just want to pause for a moment because some people are having audio problems. I'm not having any problems at all. I can hear you crystal clear. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to turn off your camera and see if that frees it up.
All right. Nobody needs to look at me anyway, so let's see if that feels a little bit better. That the camera is off.
Great. And if you can just pause a moment, and we'll try to sort this out. And sorry about this. This is actually a first time, so.
It's my trademark to be unique.
So I'm just going to ask everyone to refresh, not you, Bruce, but I'm going to ask everyone to refresh their browser.
All right.
And I've looked up the Webinar Jam help on this, and the Webinar Jam help is says Nothing that I haven't already said. So
Okay.
we're just going to hope that that does it.
Well, I didn't know if maybe it was this headset, but if you're hearing me fine, then
I can hear you fine. So it's, no, I think your headset is good. And so everyone can rest assured that the replay will be available. We're sorry about this. And I will put in a help ticket to the software as well.
great. Are we feeling like maybe we can move on?
Let's give everyone like 30 more seconds and then,
All right.
and then we will. So now I feel like we should both be singing something so people will have a gentle.
Thinking the same thing. We should all sing a song. Right now, it feels like we're on the elevator looking at
right? Yeah, where
nobody says anything.
Okay, that's see, Marilyn still can't hear, but obviously some people can because not everyone is writing in that they cannot.
Okay.
Okay, so Claretta can, so we kind of have half and half. So Bruce, just continue right on, and I'll be sure to edit this part out for the replay.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that's great. All of those attitudes that we're feeling are shaped by our life experience, and whether or not we're the traditional optimist, glasses half full, or pessimist, glasses half empty, or as I prefer to say, pragmatist, it's half a glass. That's sort of where I live my life, but I'm always prepared for it to be empty. So my wife says they kicked me out of the Optimist Club. I say it's because they changed meeting times and it didn't work for me anymore. But the where we come from and the early conversations we had about money in our family, the things sometimes we didn't participate in, but we overheard, influence us a great deal. One of the things that we will do in depth when we have the class is give you some tools for kind of building your own financial autobiography. But it's kind of fun to sit and just have early remembrances with a group of people about what your first job was and how much did you make and what did you do with the money. What's your first memory of giving a gift at church? Where did that money come from? And when you decided to start giving on your own, how did you come to an understanding of what would be the right amount for you? You'd be amazed at a subject that most people say they don't want to talk about, which is money, how long these conversations can go. When I do these exercises in a workshop, it's really hard to get people to kind of settle down and want to re-engage with me because these stories they're sharing with each other are pretty powerful. And how money was talked about in the home, and was there always a shortage, or was it just a silent conversation? Were voices louder when money was the subject, or were they very quiet? That where we come from in money and the values we were taught about what money does and how it gives us or doesn't give us value, what our relationship with it is. These things have accumulated inside of us over time, and so changing our attitudes about them can be pretty difficult. So we want to be attentive to that, and we'll have some great tools in the class in the fall to kind of get at that and to how to hear something a little different. My main goal tonight is to just, try to lower your anxiety just a little bit. We're going to give you some tips tonight of some things you can start to do that begin to give you control over your money instead of your money controlling over you. And my first rule is don't panic. That there are solutions and there are steps you can take. Sometimes it takes time, and sometimes it takes making some difficult choices. But there's a way to get to a point where you feel good about how you do with what you have, and how you make a life from the tools you have in making a living, from the resources you have for making a living, so that you're thinking about your saving, your spending, your sharing, and you develop a plan to be able to do all of those things in your life with the money you earn. So that's where we're headed. We'll pause just for a moment and ask the question, if you had more money, what would you like to do with it? And now I'm thinking specifically of the practice of generosity as you think about mission and ministry in the world. Because, the way we spend our money changes the world and changes us to some extent. And if you had a little more resource, if through the management of your resources, you increased your capacity to practice generosity, what would you like to do with that? Aside from if you just hit the lottery tonight, if you buy a ticket and like lightning striking twice in the same place, those are your odds. But let's just say it happened. What would you do? How would you want to make the world different with a lot of money? And how, even with a little bit of money, can you make the world different? Because I contend that you can. I think that generosity is the way we change the world. So here we go. We build this as 10 tips for financial wellness. I call it the Ken Barkhauer School of Economics because Ken was my father. And I remember somewhere in late high school, but before I went off to college, we sat at the kitchen table. And I had been to the bank earlier that week and opened up a checking account with money from a job I had bagging groceries at the local grocery store. And I learned how to write the check, how to balance the checkbook, how to reconcile, when all the checks aren't there, and figure out how much money I really had. And then these tips that Dad gave. That if you've been through a Dave Ramsey course, let's be honest, Dave stole all this from my dad. I mean, he must have been listening to the conversation, because long before I ever heard of Dave Ramsey, I knew these things and I got them at home. And Dad's number one rule was don't spend more than you make. Now that sounds easy enough. But to do that, you kind of got to know how much you make, and not just your gross pay and what your hourly pay is, but what do you actually take home? We have a propensity, particularly with credit cards, since we are not a cash-driven society anymore, to have the ability to spend more money than we have to pay for what we have bought. Let's be honest, that's sort of what happened when the economy collapsed the last time in 2009 and 10, is that we had bought a bunch of stuff we didn't need with money we didn't have, and then those bills came due. And that was culture-wide. That didn't belong just to you or your family. That was a nationwide problem, and we still haven't completely solved all of that. So the number one rule is to know what you make so you don't spend more than you make. But not only that, Dad said, don't spend all that you make. So if you clear $3,500 at the end of the month, don't spend $3,500 or even $3,498. Don't spend all of it. That what you really want to be able to do is to put some money aside. Dad called this paying yourself first, for savings, and that was the number one rule in our family, was that you took money and you saved money. We hadn't dealt a lot with the spirituality of money, and I'm going to come back around to that in this presentation. And then you built a budget so that you knew what all of your income was, and you knew what all of your major expenses were. This takes a little bit of time, and it's a discipline, and I'll confess that I don't always keep this as up to date as I should myself, and I'm supposed to be an expert on this stuff. But this is hard work. This is a discipline. How I find when I don't do this and I don't keep up with it, I add more stress to my life. So that having the budget and knowing exactly what's coming in every month, knowing exactly what my priorities are for what goes out every month, makes my life a lot easier. And I think Dave Ramsey does have that right when he talks about it being Financial Peace University. So part of what you do is you set the priorities, and number one priority is probably going to be you got to have a roof over your head and the necessary insurance and utilities and support for that roof over your head, and then you got to eat. So rent and or mortgage and groceries probably ought to be among those top priorities. And in many communities, you still need a vehicle. I live in a community that doesn't have great public transportation, so you really got to have a vehicle, or you got to participate in the gig economy, which then I still have to budget for, even if my Uber ride is only $35 to get from here to the airport. I still have to budget how many times I'm going to have to do that, whether I'm going to work or to catch the metro station or wherever I'm going. I need to get those priorities down, the things that I absolutely have to make my life manageable and safe. And when we do this in our class in the fall, we'll get into some ways to think through this, and we're going to come up with a long list of things that are kind of necessary in today's economy, and then the priority of what we're going to give into and what we're going to make choices about. But that setting priorities is really important. What's the most important thing my money has to go to? And pay those bills first. Set that money aside first. When I was learning how to do this, we were cash-driven folk back then, and I was a high school student. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't get my first credit card until I graduated from college, and then Sears, that was sort of a thing you got back in the early 70s. Sears sent you a credit card if you were graduating from college, and that's how you kind of got started. So we worked with cash, and literally I used an envelope system to have money set aside out of my paycheck. I'd have cash. I had checking account. Later figured out how to do this on paper, which was easier. But to start with, it was just envelopes and cash. Here's my rent money. Here's my car payment. Here's my insurance. And that was, that preparation. My insurance bill for my car only came due twice a year. But it was a pretty sizable amount when you're a teenager and not married before you hit 25 back in the day. That's a big bill. So out of every paycheck, I put away a certain amount of money so that when the bill came due in June and December, I could make that payment and not have to worry about my other priorities because I'd thought ahead. I was accruing money for those payments to come. So that's a part of the building a budget process and part of the priority process. The next thing that you want to do, Dad said, is you got to plan for emergencies because no doubt they're going to happen. You're going to get a flat tire in the car and have to buy a new tire, or a battery is going to go dead. If you own a home, believe me, there's a long list: water heaters and dishwashers and dishwashers. Sometimes I remember going about 6 months washing dishes by hand while we accumulated money to buy a dishwasher without having to press ourselves, But if it's your furnace, that's different. It's wintertime. There's going to be emergencies. So how do you plan for those and begin to set some money aside? This is different from savings. This is now thinking about planning for emergencies. And then, my father was a stickler that you should balance your checkbook down to the penny every month. Of course, back in the day when this was all done by hand and banking was primarily done by hand, the bank did make mistakes. And so you wanted to catch if there was an error either for or against you, which I can remember happening a few times early on in that process. Now, it's all done electronically, and I haven't caught an error. I've caught a few of my own, but I haven't caught any bank errors in a long time. But I still want to reconcile that statement every month because of the possibility of fraud. That's a real problem now, and it's not fraud like you tend to think, oh, somebody's going to try and hit you up for 10 grand. Well, good luck getting that out of my checking account. It's not there. What they really are trying to do now, instead of getting a few people for 10 grand, is they're trying to get 10,000 people for $15 a month, and it appears as some odd, entrance on your statement that's feeding it might look like it's, your Lowe's bill or something. You got to go through and see every month to be sure you haven't become a victim of that. That's really important. Because the bank is not likely to catch that in all cases. There's some responsibility you have. And it's still good at the end of every month to know exactly what your position is financially. What do I have in savings? What do I have in my checking account? I've done the reconciliation. I know what's outstanding in my ATM charges, et cetera. I know what bills I have coming up. I know my current position. There's something really freeing about that, particularly if you're on the good side of having a little extra money. You might get to treat yourself in some way, or you might choose you could do something special for somebody else. That all comes with knowing what your financial position is, and not doing an impulse buy and then regretting it later because you realize I didn't really have the money to do that. Another piece that is your responsibility is to plan for retirement. I'm not sure that I'll see all of the Social Security benefits that the government said I was entitled to when I started paying into it some 40-some years ago. And if you're younger than I am, you may see even less support from the government based on what you're paying in. If you don't have a defined benefits pension plan, if you're working with a 401k and that kind of thing, you really need to be disciplined in making sure that you're feeding that so that when you get to the age where you don't want to work anymore, you actually can do that. You don't have to become a greeter at Walmart or something just so you can keep making ketchup soup and eating. You want to be ahead of the game, and just a couple $100s a month, if you start early enough, can make a huge difference over the span of 50 years of working, and give you tremendous freedoms to enjoy that time rather than to be stressed about it. Now, Dad had a couple of other rules as well. One of my favorites that Dad had, and it's harder for us in our time, is to not pay interest. I think the only thing my father was paying interest on when I was growing up was the home mortgage. He literally paid cash for his cars. That's how disciplined he was. We were not rich. We were solidly middle class, but every month he took what would be the equivalent of a car payment out and put it into a special savings account. And every 4 years we'd go into the car dealership and Dad would strike a deal and then write a check and drive out not owing anybody any money. Now, I have, other than the first used car I bought, I've never been able to do that since. But if there are ways to avoid paying interest and pay attention to the kind of interest you're paying, getting the best rate possible is really important, because that's money you're just given to the banks and the financial system. You get no benefit from that. And understand how interest rates are calculated for you, that your credit score matters. Even in your auto insurance, your credit score matters. Not just how many tickets you've gotten for going a little too quick on the expressway or leaving your car parked in a no parking zone. Lots of things use your credit score to factor in how much you'll pay for something, what your rates cost, including your interest rates. So be aware of that, and pay for in cash, or use a credit card if you're using it for reward, for air miles or other kinds of rewards, that you are able to make the payment of the balance due every month. As much as you are able to do that. That saves you bunches of money. If you just think about it, say you've got 3 credit cards that you're carrying a balance on, and that to be a huge balance. Total altogether maybe $2,000 or $3,000. But at 23 or 4% interest rate, which is what a lot of credit cards run at, even for folks with good credit, suddenly you might be paying about $30 or $35 a month on each of those cards. Well, to do the math here, if I'm paying $90 a month, that's $1,200 a year I've paid just in interest that did me no good. It just made my banker happier. It made the financial industry happier. It didn't do anything for me. So avoiding interest where possible, and being smart, and maybe waiting an extra month or two to buy something that's more of a not I don't need it today kind of purchase, so you can pay cash for it, is smart money management. Trying not to give in to that impulse buy and using that credit card is that's just really, really important. Um, Another thing that my father used to love to do, and I kind of got this from him. My wife, it embarrasses her sometimes. My father would never pay full price for anything unless there was no way to avoid it. He would negotiate with the produce guy in the grocery store for a watermelon. um, you got to decide at what point do you want to, for how much do you want to do this? But certainly when you're making major purchases, appliances, when you're buying a home, when you're buying a car, when you're buying certain kinds of services, it's okay to negotiate. It's okay to work for a better price. And smart money folks do this all the time. The worst they can say to you, if you say, well, that's nice, but I think it's about 10% higher than it ought to be, or if it's $10,000, I'll give you 9 for it, and start a negotiation. You the worst thing they can do is say no. And they might say yes. In this major purchase my wife and I made recently, we saved about 18% when we were finished. I'd done my homework of the value of what it was, and I came armed. I was an intelligent consumer when I came armed to make that purchase. And this was the price. Well, we're pretty firm on that price. That's what we've got invested, yada, yada, yada. Well, by the time we were done, we had several $1,000s off of that price. And all it took was a little bit of energy and my doing a little bit of research before I went to do that. I'm not saying you should negotiate with the store clerk at Kohl's to try and get another 10% off just because you think you should. You have to decide that. But on major purchases, when we're getting into the hundreds and then thousands of dollars, I always want to negotiate. There's really no harm in that. And because I said earlier I can't count, I got a few more tips for you. One thing that I think is really important is that if you're doing this financial planning and working in you're married or in a relationship, you have a partner, you should do this together. It should not become the responsibility, and it is kind of a burden at times, but certainly the responsibility and discipline of one person in the partnership to carry this load and to feel the anxiety that goes with doing the budgeting and making sure you're coming in with the right numbers every month, et cetera. This is a work you do together. You set goals together of where you would like to be. What are your long-term strategies and goals? It goes back to priorities. It's not just, can I make my mortgage payment, my health insurance, and eat, and have transportation and clothes on my body. But, gosh, we'd like to take a vacation once a year and go someplace nice, et cetera. That you plan together, and that goal setting and priority shaping then together has you making equal sacrifice of, it's only $5 for a Starbucks once a day, but gosh, that's between us $50 a week. That's $200 a month. That's a vacation. That's over $2,200 a year. That all of a sudden that matters, and we've made this choice together. And I don't mean to just pick on Starbucks. You can find your own little thing, but it's an example of how little things can add up to be a lot. And that you're in it together. So there's no feelings of animosity or jealousy, no feelings of resentment within the partnership about who's having to carry the load or who's always so aware that they're making the choice not to make an extra purchase, to not go to that sale with the 30% off coupon or whatever because they know we're going to be a little tight on the budget. Everybody who's involved in making the money and spending the money should know what the current status is of the money that you share. I think that's really important, and I think it makes for financial peace in the relationship. The other thing that you need to do that was not a part of my father's set of rules, but it is very much a part of my wife and my rules in our home. Our rules are very clear that we give money away, that for something other than for ourselves, that we are interested in improving the world, and we know that money is a resource and a tool that does that. That we don't want money to be our master, we want it to be our servant. And one of the most powerful ways we do that is being able to let go of some of it. I can't stress this enough, that that as long as you can't let go of the dollar, it owns you. When you can freely let go of it and release it into the world to do something for someone other than yourself, you now are its master. You now control the money. It doesn't control you. And so really my first rule, if we were numbering, is the baseline rule before we even start numbering at 1. It's number 0. It's the foundation, is that you want to be generous. And you do that within your capacity. Not everybody can do the same amount or the same percentage, based on where we are in our life, based on the commitments that we've made for education and housing, etc., where we find ourselves in this moment. Not everyone can give the same amount, but everyone can give something. Even if it's $1, it can make a difference. And so I want to encourage you, as the first rule in money, is to be thinking about ways in which you can use your money to help make the world a better place. And the remarkable thing about God's economy is that when you give it away, somehow you get absolutely blessed by that process. Now, I'm not saying give to get more. What I'm saying is that there's a tremendous amount of joy that comes in giving something away. Scientists are now actually able to show us through MRIs and other readings of the body's chemicals and heartbeat and respiration, all these things, that giving away, being generous, is good for our health. Christian Smith wrote a book recently called The Generosity Paradox, or The Paradox of Generosity, that talks about this, and that people, they sleep better at night, they're happier, they're better adjusted, they have less anxiety and stress in their life when they're practicing some form of appropriate, based on their capacity level, of generosity. So let's make that the foundation piece, and then add our numbers beyond that, and you quickly realize that we've come to a baker's dozen. And who doesn't like to get the extra donut when you buy a dozen and they give you 13? So we really, instead of 10 tips, have come away tonight with 13. These are real basic things. They're not rocket science, but the issue is doing them, of taking the time and the discipline to sit down and build that budget. Have this difficult conversation with your partner if you live with another person, and share resources together. This is important. And so for fun, we're going to take a quick poll here. We've arrived at a point where we can do this and have enough time to take a few questions at the end, and give some shameless promotion for the future. So I'd like you to look at this list that we've talked about, the 10 things. And the other freebies, the do it together and the be generous, we'll set those aside for the purpose of the poll. Look at the 10 tips, read through these, and take the poll question that Katie's going to allow you to do now, of which of these 10 things is the easiest for you. What's the thing, if you're not doing it tonight, you think when you get up tomorrow morning, you could do this, or by the end of the weekend, you could do this one thing, change this one attitude about money. So I'll shut up for a minute, and Katie, you can give directions on how to take the poll.
Great. The poll is up, and a couple of people have responded. And so, yeah, if you're on a mobile device, you might have to swipe back and forth a little bit, but we'd love to see what the answers are. So the answers that are coming in right now are pretty evenly split, Bruce. Don't spend more than you make, build a budget, and balance your bank account are the top 3 easiest.
Wonderful. And those are great places to start. So now let's conversely look at which of these 10 things do you think might be the most challenging for you as you think about this? Which one of these, as you look at the list, is, ooh, I don't know. I certainly won't do that by Sunday, but maybe a year from now, if somebody holds my feet to the fire and twists my arm and makes it uncomfortable, maybe I can learn to do this. Which of these things is the most challenging? Go ahead and respond to that.
Great. It's exactly the same process, and the poll will look exactly the same, except that the question is one word different. What's challenging instead of easiest? So one of the answers that came in is planning for emergencies. And yeah, I feel you on that one. And if any of you are like me, some of the things that Bruce said, you were like, oh my gosh, he must have my name written on his paper of notes in front of him. So plan for emergencies and pay yourself first, when I can totally understand that, and plan for retirement. So those are the top three right now.
That makes sense, because that involves putting away and not spending something on immediate needs, right? That involves that some form of savings and some form of trying to squeeze out a few more dimes every day for something else when we already feel pretty overwhelmed. And so here's the trick. Start with 50 cents a day, right? I mean, just start there. $1 a day, 10 cents a day. What have you got? Start taking your change out at the end of every day of your pocket, whatever's left, and putting it in a piggy bank, literally, and let that accumulate rather than spending it. And maybe you might do the same thing with $1 bills. That I'll just take the ones out and the change and put them in this little bank at the end of every day or every 2 or 3 days, whatever you can manage, and see. Because if I'm of the sort, and this is part of the discipline, I don't carry cash because I'll spend it. I will. If I've got $20 in my pocket and I drive by Dairy Queen, which I don't need. I need to drive by. I don't need to drive in. I deserve a blizzard today. I'm going to have one. Well, my waistline doesn't appreciate it. And, if I do that a couple times a month, I've spent 15 or 20 bucks I could have had set aside, coupled with another 15 or 20 bucks here and there, that suddenly was $40, which suddenly at the end of the year, well, shoot, that's $480. That could put new tires on my car, or at least a couple of new tires on my car, right? That'd pay for half a water heater in my house. So it's starting small. It's not looking and say, oh my gosh, I really should have, and we'll talk about these kind of numbers in the class in the fall, I really should have a minimum of 90 days. If I didn't take in a dime for 90 days, I've got all those expenses covered in a savings account for emergencies. And not just savings to go on vacation or savings for retirement. That's just my emergency disaster fund. And if you look at it that way, and you'll freak out. So don't try to bite it all off at once. It's like eating the proverbial elephant. You take it a bite at a time. That's how you get there. And it might just be 15 or 20 bucks a month the first month you do it. But if you get in the discipline and get in the habit, then you can start to do these. And then it's not just the emergency fund. You're able to put a little bit toward retirement. You're able to put a little bit toward savings, so you can take a weekend away someplace, or buy a little something special for yourself, right? Or a night out to dinner. And we'll talk about the ways in which we can discipline ourselves and the choices we can make when we go at a deeper level. But that's a starting place for this conversation. So I'm going to shut up now and let Katie talk for a minute, because I want to hear your questions, and I want her to do the things she needs to do, so we call this a success tonight.
I think we can call it a success already. Feel free to turn your camera back on, Bruce. We'll cross our fingers that nothing disastrous will happen technology-wise. But we did have a question about the name of the book that you mentioned, the stewardship book.
There's several books that I would recommend, but it's called The Generosity Paradox, or The Paradox of Generosity. Kristen Smith, who is a professor at Notre Dame. For some folks who've been in the stewardship realm for a little while, might recognize his name if I put it with Emerson and Snell. They wrote the book Passing the Plate: Why American Christians Don't Give Away More Money, based on a economic practices survey that was done in 2005. Now, you got to be kind of geeky to probably recognize that, but that's that same guy. And this is a really fun book. And I can, with our bonus material, I could send along a short little bibliography, and encourage folks, why not, shameless self-promotion. If you want to start thinking theologically and biblically about money, pick up for, I think they're $2 to download it from Chalice Press, the little book, devotional book we wrote on stewardship, called Community of Prayer. That's a great little primer to start thinking holistically about stewardship. It's not just about money, and to kind of explore some biblical passage and to begin to think about money as a spiritual issue. It's a spiritual care issue if you're a pastor in your congregation. Something else we'll explore when we go a little bit deeper. I think you might find the book helpful. So Community of Prayer, Chalice Press, and look for Kristen Smith, The Paradox of Generosity, or the Generosity Paradox. They'd be two good starting places.
Perfect. Thank you. And I put those into the chat box so people can have them as well. So what we want to do now is offer you the opportunity to pre-register for the class that we'll be having in October. So Bruce has generously agreed to teach this class. So we'll be going into the 10 steps plus some. It'll happen the week of September 16th. Let me go ahead and give you the link for that, and then I'll tell you a little more about that and turn it over to Bruce so he can really talk to you about it more. 1 second, need to click publish. All right, so you can click on the link, and basically this will take you to our learning platform site, and from there you can click yes, I'm interested. If you've never taken a class with us, it'll ask you to create an account, which takes about 10 seconds to fill in your name and your email. And for attendees of the webinar, it's a very, very special price. I think Bruce can talk to you about the economics of it, but $37 total, which is about $10 a day for Bruce's mentorship and time. And you'll have the ability to go deeper on all these areas, but really, these are all tools that you have. And I imagine if you're like me, what brings you here is not because you don't have the tools, but because there's something else stopping you from using them. And so we'll have the opportunity to figure out what that is and overcome it so you can actually use the tools. And then if you're allergic to spreadsheets, we can teach you how to use a spreadsheet. If you're allergic to a budget, we can definitely teach you how to use the budget. So Bruce, what else are you envisioning? And this is just going to be part 1. We envision some parts 2 and 3 where we'll really have the opportunity to think theologically, like Bruce was saying, but we got to get our basics down first.
Right. I do envision this, looking at some of the hard choices we have to make, and we'll talk about managing debt and how to negotiate debt for debt reduction, and what the pluses and minuses are, and some strategies for how to do that and have some wins. We'll talk about some formulas to be thinking of relative to retirement. We'll talk about formulas relative to trying to figure out what percentage of my income every month should be going to various things that are necessities. And are you balanced? Are you in or out of whack, as it were, with that the nuts and bolts thing we will do with the budget piece, and then we'll begin to expand our theological thinking around money and our relationship with money. And think about our own stewardship and our generosity, and the ways in which the choices we make around money really do impact us in the world around us. And for pastors, we'll even talk a little bit about how and why even those folks of means in our congregation need to confront and have a conversation about this important topic. And you'd be surprised, many of them want to have that conversation. They know they have resources, and they really are looking for some guidance and direction about ways in which they might improve the communities in which they live and enrich their own life in ways that aren't through buying stuff. So that's all kind of looking down the road, if that's helpful.
That's exceedingly helpful. And I wonder how many of you also have been in church settings or even just community settings where the thinking about money kind of makes you like cringe a little bit, like when everyone's in scarcity mode. So these are all tools to get us out of scarcity mode and into generosity mode, which is a term I just love, Bruce. I don't know if you've patented that yet, but or if you came up with it, but
yeah. I'll take credit for it. Sure, why
all
not?
right, that works.
No, it's a great
term. We're really looking forward to this because this is like 101 tools that a lot of us just don't get for one reason or another.
Yeah. So those of you who've made it to the end, Katie's going to get an email out to you. I'm going to send her a link to a tool that I use when I teach a class on this. It's actually, if you were at a different competing seminary, it's part of the core curriculum to take a stewardship course where one of the places I teach, and I'm on the faculty, and they have to do, everyone to pass my course has to do a personal budget. It's required. So I have a tool that I use in that course that I'm happy to share with the DSF community.
Thank you so much. Yes. And we'll give you a slide with Bruce's email, or you can email me and I can get it to you as well. And Claretta asked a very excellent question that I neglected to say because I was getting carried away with the material. The class starts in the week of September 16th, and we'll be in touch with you about the details and the times and kind of just work with everyone depending on the time zone that you're in. And so this is the pre-registration. The nice thing is when we offer these classes, even if you can't be present live every single day, which not that many people can, most people have evening obligations, then we record everything and you still get the benefit of being there live. You can still participate via email, lots of different ways. So it's actually a really good opportunity. Whether you think I don't have 3 nights in a row, that's not a problem. We've done a lot of these so far. It's never been a barrier. So we record everything and then upload it, and you get access to all the bonus materials then that other people won't get until much later. So thank you for the question. And I got carried away with the technical issues and then with the content. So I'm sorry I didn't mention that right off the bat.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their time. What a gift you have given me, the privilege of sharing an hour of your life, that you would give that gift to me, and I hope you feel that you've received something in return for that. I hope maybe you'll think about joining us in the fall to go a little bit deeper with all of this, and want to express my thanks to Katie and to DSF for inviting me to participate. That is a great privilege for me. I'm humbled by that and grateful they felt that this might be worth someone's time. So my thanks to DSF staff and to Katie. And if you ever need to reach me, Barkhauer at disciples.org is the best way to find me. And I also answer my own phone. So if we get into an email conversation, I'd be happy to share my cell phone number with you. And we can go a little deeper if you need to get a little bit of coaching with some of this. That's what we're here to do. We want to make your life better, and having a handle on your money so that you control it and it doesn't control you is one powerful way to improve your life.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce, for your time and your generosity and giving us this hour, this free training. We look forward to hearing from everyone. You can look to hear from me shortly. I will email out all of these details in the next day or two. And thank you, Bruce. I'm going to go ahead and click into the recording, but we'll still be here if anyone needs to chat right after.